In this lesson, we'll talk about subdivision surfaces and working with a smoothing workflow. So the third type of geometry that we can deal with here in Maya are called subdivision surfaces, also called sub-Ds sometimes. And so if we take a look at this cube, this is a subdivision surface. All right, so you can see it has a cube shape, and we sort of see the edges, and we see where the points might be, and it sort of looks like the polygon cube that we had before, except it is smooth. And so really that's what's happening. It's taking polygon geometry like this and applying a specific smoothing algorithm to it to smooth the geometry between these points. So we're getting something like this. Okay. Now we can still access the components of our subdivision surface in the same way as we did the other two types of geometry. I'll just right click and you can see we can display edges or a vertex or a face. So if I select vertex, you can see that we get the same pink points, and actually if we take a look at this, they actually correspond more with this polygon cube than they do with this smoothed sub-D cube. Okay, and so much like the NURB surface, these points lie outside the surface. So what's happening is it's taking the points, let's say this one, this one, this one, and this one, okay, and it's using that smoothing algorithm to create the surface underneath. So we can actually see that smooth surface being calculated. So it's taken that and smoothed it down. It's taking all those points into account when it does that. Okay? And so using sub-Ds will give us a kind of the best of both worlds in many cases, because we can get a very smooth surface, but we can still treat this like a polygon. So we can extrude pieces of it and so forth. So we could take the points and we could move them around. Okay? We can do like that. We can also access the edges. Okay, this gives us even a clear indication that this is related to the polygons, because we get this pink sort of polygon looking cage around it. We can manipulate this cage. So in that way it's kind of like a NURBS, whereas we're sort of manipulating components that are off of the actual limit surface that we see. Okay, and then we can also access the particular faces. Okay. Now, a couple of things that are kind of unique to subdivision surfaces is the kind of the hierarchy workflow that you can work with this. So if I, for instance, take and select the vertices on the top, and I right click, I can refine those. So if I want to just add some detail onto the top of this model, I can go ahead and refine those down. Okay, you'll notice over here display level now says 1, and so we can actually manipulate these points here. Okay, now again, if I want to come in and start to refine this further and add a little bit more detail, and I just select, let's say, these 4 points here, I can right click on them and say refine selected once again. Now I'm on level 2 and I've gone down even deeper and I'm able to manipulate that surface. Okay, so this is nice for adding detail in very specific areas. Okay. Now I can right click on this and I can say display finer or display coarser. Right now you can see we're on level 2. If I go to display coarser, it's going to show level 1, which gets us back to those original points. If I go all the way back to level 0, which is the base, it gets us back to those main points. You can see the model detail I have is still there, but now we're manipulating it on a coarser level. Okay, so this can be useful for in many applications. We can also crease edges. So to make edges sharper, we can select some edges, and I'll just go ahead and select these edges on the outside here. Okay, and the subdivision tools are going to be located under surfaces. So we've got this menu item for subdivision surfaces. So now we can go and do some creasing. So we can do a full crease, and you can see how that sharpens that up. You can see we've got an extra edge down there. So if we do a full crease, you can see it's telling our object we don't want any smoothing to happen along these edges. So you can see that the object goes all the way to the edge. Okay, you can see that there. Now this still smooths because we don't have any creasing along this direction. So we're still smoothing going this way, but as we come up here, these are creased, and so there's no smoothing happening. So that's good for adding sharp edges to your models. You got something that was smooth geometry, you want to add a little bit of resolution in a specific area, and then maybe you want to have a completely sharp edge. subds may be the way to go for you. Okay. Now keep in mind that we're going to be probably going to transfer these to other, between applications, or if you're in a pipeline. So if you're using subds all the way, that's fine, but in some cases they may need to be baked down into, so for instance, if we have geometry that's just in this specific area, we would have to bake that down so we have the same resolution everywhere and make that a polygon surface. So again, it depends on your pipeline whether subds are going to work for you. There's an alternative to working with subds because it can be a little bit confusing sometimes when we're working with subdivision surfaces. The main point of the subds that I like is the fact that we can get that smooth surface underneath, but we're working with still a low resolution cage. Okay. Now, there are other methods of smoothing. As we'll see here, we have a polygon cube. If we want this to be smooth, kind of like our subd cube, we could go in and add a smooth to it. So we'll go to polygons, and we'll go to mesh, and we'll smooth it. Okay. And we can come over here to the inputs and go to smooth. We've got one division. We increase the divisions, we can get something very smooth. So you can see visually that is a smooth cube, just like what we had with the subd. If we go in here though and we try to manipulate the components, you can see that it actually added those polygons that are necessary to get that smooth shape. And so if we want to go ahead and try to move and reshape this, it's going to be very difficult because we're actually working with those smoothed polygons. Now in many cases this may be what you want. You want something very high res so you can get in there and really add some intricate detail. So it just depends again on what you're actually doing. An alternative to adding a smooth, and you can come in here and modify your divisions if you want to, and actually take that back to 0, no smoothing. Okay, you can see that sort of gives us a very visual indication of what's kind of happening over here. You can see that it is taking, let's say, these three faces and breaking those down. So if we add another division here, you can see that it's actually dividing those and smoothing them. All right. Now another method that is really quick and easy to use is to use the Smooth Mesh preview in Maya. And to do that, we simply need to hit 3 on our keyboard when we're working with a polygon object. So if I hit 3, you can see that I now have something that looks very similar to our subdivision cube, but it's still a polygon. Okay, I can still access the points. You can see I've got the points on here that I can access. I can still get the edges. I can still select the faces. I can do all the things I can do with a polygon, but we're now seeing a smoothed version. Okay, if I hit 2, that's going to show you not only the smooth surface, but also the polygon cage around it that it's using to calculate. So this is our actual polygon object, which we can now see. Okay, and if I want to go back to working with the base, I just go and hit 1. So I find that I use this actually a lot, knowing that I want to have kind of a smooth surface, but I still want to be able to use my polygon tools to model. You can go in and start to manipulate your model, do some extruding, let's say, bring some of these extrusions out, and at any time I can just hit 3 to see what that looks like as a smooth surface. Or if I want to come in while it's smooth, grab a face, do an extrude, pull that out, I can do that. Okay, and then at any time go back to 1, see what that looks like. So I find that this is a great kind of solution for what I used to use subdivision for. I didn't really get into doing too much with the hierarchy, but I wanted to have a smooth version of my model. I wanted to be able to see it, and the end result, if it's for a movie, oftentimes they would need to subdivide it at render time, or they were going to use a subdivision algorithm to smooth it at render time. And so I wanted to deliver a polygon object that could, when smoothed using this algorithm, give the object its final look. Okay, but I wanted it to be portable. I wanted to actually have the resolution built into the model, and not necessarily in subdivision creasing or in the subdivision hierarchy. I wanted to actually build it into the geometry. And so this can be a great kind of compromise for working with a smooth sort of workflow. And this is something that a lot of people are going to use some type of a related workflow to this, where they take a polygon object and will smooth it out in some way, whether it's a subdivision surface that's been added, or whether it's a smooth, or whether it's just using the Smooth Mesh preview. Okay, and that's just 1, 2, 3 on your keyboard to get those. So 1, 2, and 3 to get that cage. Okay, and that's kind of related to, remember how we saw over here, we had the cage, we're able to access the edge, and there's the cage. This is using a specific subdivision algorithm with the hierarchy nested in here and the creasing that we can add, and that's actually a subdivision surface, whereas this is still a polygon, but we're able to see that smoothing happen underneath. Okay. All right, so with these workflows, we're still using many of the polygon tools to actually manipulate these. With this solution, we can actually just straight away use all the polygon tools. Same thing here, although we're working with higher resolution. With the sub-B surface, there are times when you can actually move the components. And right now we're in standard mode. If we go to our surfaces menu set, we go to subdivision surfaces, you can see we have a standard mode and a polygon proxy mode. If you want to use the polygon tools on this, we'll go to polygon proxy mode. That'll give us that cage, and that'll allow us to select that face, let's say, and extrude it and give you the same sort of effect that you would get when you're working with our smooth mesh preview. Okay, and then when you want to go back, work with your hierarchy, you can go down to standard mode, and then you're back. Okay, so just one more thing to keep in mind when you're working with subdivision surfaces. So those are a few options that we can use when trying to get kind of the best of both worlds between polygons, which are very flexible, they're very easy to work with. There's a lot of tools that you can use to build those out and create complex interconnected shapes. But we also want shapes that are smooth without having to add a lot of polygons that we have to keep track of and manipulate. We want to have a low res control cage on that. So these kind of options give us a little bit more what we're looking for in terms of a compromise between those two. Okay, so those are kind of the three types of geometry and workflows that we can work with, the three basic ones. I'm sure that you'll find the one that you like. You may like NURBS better. You may like polygons, working with polygons better. It's only a matter of experimentation in terms of finding what you like and what works best for you. So I'd encourage you definitely to do that. So the next lesson, we're actually going to talk about working with a hierarchy and kind of some workflow tips before we start our project. So I know we're kind of taking a while to get into our project, but I want to make sure you understand kind of the basics of working with models, some of the things to think about, just so you're aware of a lot of those tips before you get started. So we'll go ahead and do that in the next lesson.